There is a line so quiet that most people cross it without ever knowing they were standing right on the edge. But you felt it. You felt it the moment your feet touched the ground on the other side. Something moved inside you. It was final, and it had no clear name. It was like a door closing behind you in a room you didn't even know you'd walked into. This is not about success or approval. It's not about what anyone else could see or measure. This is about the invisible test you passed when nobody was there to clap for you. When the night sat heavy on your chest, and you decided to stay standing, even while everything in you was begging to fall apart. I want to put words to that feeling you've been carrying. That strange quiet knowing that you've become someone different at the deepest level, even though you can't point to one exact moment when it happened. This understanding comes from the deepest places of inner work and psychology. From the inner landscapes where real change happens, not in the light of effort and willpower, but in the dark, where your soul does its deepest work when you're not in control. By the time we reach the end of this time together, you'll be able to recognize exactly what kind of initiation you went through and why so few people ever arrive where you are now. The idea of individuation, of becoming your true self, is not a soft, pretty process of self-help and small upgrades. It is a kind of psychological death and rebirth. It tears down what you thought you were so that what you really are can finally breathe. Most people talk about growth like it's a ladder. You climb step by step, always going up, always moving towards some picture of perfection in their mind. But what you went through was nothing like that. You fell. You broke. You came undone in ways nobody saw, and that left no obvious scars. And in that falling apart, something ancient and unshakable rose up from the broken pieces of who you used to be. There are thresholds that separate people who only survive their pain from those who let that same pain shape them into something new. These are not just nice metaphors. They're real shifts in energy and awareness that reorganize how your mind, your heart, and your whole inner world are built. You crossed one of those thresholds. You just didn't know to call it that at the time. For you, it felt more like drowning, didn't it? Like standing in a room where all the air was slowly taken away, and you had to learn to breathe in a completely new way. That suffocating feeling was your old identity dying. It was gasping for the air of old habits and familiar roles that no longer worked. The shadow work you did, whether or not you use that word for it, was not the trendy kind of self-reflection that fills journals and therapy sessions with comfortable stories and half-truths. You went down into the actual basement of your being. You walked into the parts of you where rage sits next to shame, where your mother's unspoken grief blended with your own, where patterns from your family line curled up like sleeping snakes waiting to strike. Most people take one quick look into that darkness and run away, then build whole lives to make sure they never have to look again. They build careers, friendships, distractions, and busy schedules around the single goal of never meeting themselves fully. But you didn't have that option, did you? Something in you would not let you escape. It refused all the exits. In old alchemy, there is a phase called nigredo, the blackening, the decay, the necessary rot that has to happen before anything truly new can be born. You cannot make gold without first taking the base material down to its darkest, rawest form. You went through your nigredo. You sat in the thick blackness of your own mind and heart while everyone around you seemed to go on with their normal lives. On the surface, nothing looked different. But inside, you were melting and reforming in a fire only you could feel. From the outside, it might have looked like depression. It might have looked like you were breaking down. But what was really happening was a different kind of death, the kind that prepares queens, the clearing out that makes room for real sovereignty. The sacrifices you made were not the kind people celebrate. There were no big dramatic exits that made for good stories at dinner parties. You didn't walk out of a job with a slam of the door or leave a relationship with a public explosion. Your sacrifices were quieter, and they cut much deeper. You let go of needing to be understood. You stopped playing the version of yourself that kept everyone else comfortable. You let people think your silence meant you were cold, when in truth, it was the only honest answer you had left. You walked away from sources of validation that once felt like oxygen. And you learned to breathe thinner air that only your own truth could supply. People sometimes describe individuation as the process of becoming who you really are. That sounds soft, almost gentle. The reality is much harsher. Becoming yourself means killing off everyone else's idea of who you are supposed to be. It means disappointing people who love the version of you that met their needs. It means staying in a kind of loneliness so deep that some nights you wondered if you had made a terrible mistake, if you had broken something that could never be put back together. But that loneliness was not rejection, it was gestation. You were in the womb of your own becoming. And nothing real grows in a crowd. There's a moment in this kind of journey that very few people talk about. It is the moment you realize the life you built no longer fits. The people you could once sit with now feel like sand in your eyes. The conversations that used to pull you in now sound flat and empty, like copies of copies that have lost all original meaning. This isn't you judging them. This is about frequency. Your inner frequency changed when you brought your hidden parts into the light. You became a different instrument. And most people are still playing the same old tune. You cannot harmonize with what you've already outgrown. And when you try, the clash you feel isn't just emotional. It can feel physically painful, like noise in your nervous system. When the false ego dies, the one you built to survive in a world that never fully felt like home, the thing that comes forward is not louder, it's not flashier, it's quieter, more steady. There is a certain kind of magnetism in people who have gone through real psychological death and rebirth. They don't need to announce themselves, because simply being in the room changes the room. You've probably seen this. People respond to you differently now. Some are pulled toward you with a surprising intensity, almost like they're reaching for something in you they can't name. Others slowly or suddenly back away, unsettled without knowing why. Both reactions are a form of recognition. People sense that you live in a territory most only visit in moments of crisis, loss, or sudden clarity. This new frequency you carry is not something you can fake. It's not something you produce by repeating positive thoughts or trying to be high vibe. It came from sitting with your own darkness long enough that it stopped shocking you. You stayed there until you could see the shapes of your fears and hear the real voices of your wounds without doing whatever they said. You looked at the parts of you that scared you and stayed present anyway. Some call this the integration of opposites. The meeting of your conscious life and your unconscious depths into something more whole. In real life, it doesn't feel like a neat theory. It feels like swallowing fire and discovering that you're actually fireproof. The things that once burned you, the comments, the judgments, the memories, they still show up, but they move through you in a new way. There is a core part of you now that feels larger than your everyday personality. A self with a capital S, you could say. It holds the total of who you are. It stands at the center when all your smaller pieces link together and agree to serve something deeper. Most people never live from that place. They live from their ego, the surface personality that was built to manage fear, fit into groups, and get needs met. That ego answers to outside pressure and inside anxiety. You have touched something deeper. There is now a place inside you that does not shake when someone criticizes you. It does not swell when someone praises you. It does not wait for the world to confirm what it already knows. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is the ego trying to feel big. What you carry now is quieter. It is the calm of someone who already died once and learned she's still here. Psychology often separates the day-to-day ego awareness from a deeper realization of self. The ego is needed. You need it to drive a car, to go to work, to answer emails. But it was never built to be your source of worth, your final guide, and your whole identity all at once. Before this shift, your ego was working overtime. It tried to be your sense of value, your full-time decision maker, your bodyguard, and your one and only you. No wonder you were exhausted. It's too much weight for something that fragile. The ego was meant to serve the deeper self, not replace it. When you went through your inner death, what actually died was the ego's need to run everything. The ego is still here. It's still useful, but it is no longer the one in control. Something far quieter and deeper guides you now. This changes why you can now hold two truths that seem opposite without falling apart. The ego wants everything to be simple. Good or bad. Right or wrong. Safe or unsafe. It wants clean boxes. But the deeper self can hold paradox. You can be strong and soft at the same time. You can feel sure and still be open. You can love someone and still choose to leave. These no longer feel like impossible choices. They're simply the honest complexity of a mind and heart that can now handle its own full range. The inner authority that comes from this wholeness is unlike anything the untested ego can access. It doesn't come from rules. It doesn't come from what you've read or what someone told you. Even when it lines up with wise teachings, it doesn't depend on them. It rises from inside you, from that deeper center. And when it speaks, it doesn't need a long explanation. When you know from this place, arguing stops making sense. You're not out to convince anyone, including yourself. You just know the way you know your own name. The shift from warrior to queen is not about giving up or withdrawing from life. It's about finally seeing that the real war was always inside you. And now that you've won that one, the outer battles lose some of their grip. You no longer need to fight for your worth, because it is no longer up for negotiation. You no longer need to prove your strength, because your strength is as natural to you now as breathing. This change alters how you move through the world. Where you used to push, you now simply show up. Where you used to defend yourself, you now allow what is true and let the rest fall away. Not because you're powerless, but because you're whole. People who have gone through this process show what some call psychological maturity. In simple terms, it means the ego now works for the deeper self instead of pretending to be the self. In everyday life, this means your personality is no longer driving your choices from old wounds and handed down patterns. There is a deeper intelligence leading. One that knows without needing to explain how it knows. One that chooses without the endless loop of doubt and second guessing. You have tapped into this. It's why choices that used to torment you for weeks now become clear within minutes or hours. Your inner compass shifted back into its true place when you stopped letting other people's expectations be your North Star. The warrior part of you is essential for a long time. It protected you when life felt like a series of battles. When every meeting, every message, every silence felt like either a threat or a vote on your value. But warriors grow tired. They carry wounds that never close because they're always getting ready for the next attack. The queen archetype is different. She has moved beyond living in constant defense. She has secured her own kingdom, which in this case means the territory inside her own skin. Threats still exist. Challenges still show up, but they don't tell her who she is anymore. They don't write her story. She responds. She does not react. And that small difference changes everything. There is a new quality in how you take up space now. When you walk into a room, you are not scanning faces, begging silently for approval. You're not measuring danger in every corner. You're just here. fully in your own body, fully in your own presence. That alone changes the room. People who are used to taking up more space than they've earned suddenly can't do it quite as easily around you. Your grounded presence creates a boundary that doesn't need to be spoken or defended. It just exists. Those who respect real power recognize it in you almost immediately. Those who rely on manipulation, guilt, or performance to get what they want find that their usual tricks somehow slide off. They can't get a grip on you. The power that comes after deep integration is different from the power the world usually celebrates. It doesn't shout. It doesn't show off. People who are still split inside often misunderstand this softness. They think quiet means weak. They think calm means easy to control, until they meet the part of you that will not move. The part that knows exactly who she is and what she will or will not accept. You have become dangerous in the way that truth is dangerous. Your very being challenges the stories and lies that other people live by. You don't have to say anything. Just refusing to shrink. Refusing to apologize for being clear. Refusing to smooth your edges so others feel safe. That refusal itself becomes a lesson, one many people are not ready to learn. Some call this deep presence numinous, that feeling of something both deeply familiar and slightly beyond this world. It becomes more available after you've gone through a real inner death and rebirth. You carry that now. It's not magic in some fantasy sense, but it is mysterious. It moves in ways your thinking brain cannot fully track. People will call it charisma. But it's more than charm or physical beauty. It is the quiet glow of someone who has stood face to face with her whole self, light and dark, and survived. A person who is truly integrated sends out a signal that the unconscious mind of others picks up on, even when their conscious mind has no idea what it's feeling. This is why some people feel strangely nervous around you, or strangely open, or both. You unsettle some people without trying. Your energy shakes the walls of their defended ego. They have spent years building systems and stories to avoid meeting themselves. And your presence is a living reminder that this can't last forever. Sooner or later, life takes everyone to their own threshold. But most people don't want to know that. So instead, they place the discomfort on you. They label you intimidating, cold, or too much. What they really mean is, you remind me of the parts of myself I've locked away. This is not yours to fix. Your work is not to turn your light down so others can stay comfortable in their darkness. In old alchemical symbols, the queen also stands for a kind of receiving that is not weak. She receives because she knows her value creates its own pull. She does not chase. She does not beg. She does not persuade. What is meant for her finds her. What is not meant simply falls away. You've entered this stage, whether or not you would have used that word for it. Things that once took huge effort now seem to unfold with less pushing. Not because life suddenly became simple, but because you stopped fighting against who you are. You aligned with your own truth. And real alignment looks like magic from the outside. But on the inside, it is the result of brutal honesty with yourself. There is another symbol from alchemy coagulation. It's the stage where what was once broken down, melted, and purified finally takes on a solid form. After your old identity dissolved, after you went through the cleansing of deep shadow work, something finally hardened into place inside you. This is not just poetic language, you can feel it. It's a clear shift in how you relate to life. Where before you were almost through, letting every opinion, every expectation, every fear shape your choices. Now there's a kind of filter. You still feel, you still care, but you are selective. You let in what feeds you. You let go of what drains you. And you do it without long speeches and without guilt. This receptive kind of power follows laws that modern science is still catching up to, though ancient teachings have pointed to them for centuries. When you stop sending out the signal of I need, I lack, I'm chasing, your whole energy changes. You start attracting instead of chasing. And I don't mean that in a shallow, manifest whatever you want way. I mean in the simple sense that your inner state sets the tone for what can connect with you. Your frequency decides what can really reach you. When you were more split inside, living out of old wounds and unfinished patterns, you kept drawing in people and situations that matched those wounds. Not because you wanted them, but because that was your signal. Now that you've integrated more of yourself, now that you stand more whole, only what is at least moving toward wholeness can really come close. Everything else drifts by. It can hover for a moment, but it cannot fully land. The loneliness that comes with this level of growth is real. It's not something you can fix with one new friend or a new hobby. You are moving at a different frequency now. The talks that once filled you now feel like you're speaking a language nobody else in the room understands. You can be in a crowded space and feel more alone than when you're sitting quietly by yourself. Because at least when you're alone, you don't have to flatten your truth into something easy and safe for others to handle. This is not about feeling better than other people. This is about geography. You are standing in a new place on the inner map. The view from here shows you things most people never see. Becoming whole means accepting some distance from the comfort and safety of the group. The group, what we call the collective, runs on shared stories, shared fears, shared rules. It needs a level of sameness to keep operating. You stepped outside that deal. You are no longer willing to pretend you don't see what you clearly see. You are no longer willing to act like you don't know what you deeply know. That level of honesty has a cost. The price is that you cannot fully belong in spaces that ask you to shrink. You can visit. You can love people who still live there. But you cannot hand over your truth to buy acceptance anymore. And here is the key: this loneliness is not empty. It is not the painful emptiness of someone nobody chose. It is the spaciousness of someone who chose accuracy over comfort. There is a kind of holiness to this aloneness. In that space, you hear things you couldn't hear in the noise. In that silence, you sense meaning and direction that endless conversations would never reveal. You are not alone because you are lacking. You are alone because you have become enough. And because you are enough, you no longer require constant proof of your value from the outside. The few people who can meet you at this level become almost impossibly precious. When you meet someone else who has done this inner work, who has walked through their own fire, the recognition is instant and deep. You don't have to translate yourself. You don't have to sell your truth. You don't have to shrink or perform. There is a shared respect between people who have each looked into their own abyss and come back changed. These relationships are rare, but their depth makes up for their rarity. One real conversation with someone who truly understands can carry you through months of more superficial contact with those who don't. There is a word for the way inner and outer events sometimes line up in a way that feels charged with meaning: synchronicity. When your inner state lines up with what appears in the outside world in a way that simple chance doesn't seem to explain. If this video or these words reached you in a moment when you needed them, if you feel these sentences drop into your chest like something you already knew but had never heard out loud, that is synchronicity. Some deeper part of you led you here because you are ready to name what has already happened inside you. You are ready to name the crown you have been wearing without knowing it had a name. You did not get here by accident. You were pulled here by the part of you that knows you crossed a threshold most people spend their whole lives trying not to see. When your inner world reaches a certain level of order and clarity, when your conscious choices and your unconscious drives start to move in the same direction, the outside world begins to mirror that. Opportunities show up. The right piece of information appears at exactly the right time. People who can support the next phase of your becoming walk into your life in ways that look random, but are not. This is not magic in the cartoon sense. And it's not the watered down idea of manifest anything you see on social media. It is the natural result of living in harmony with what is true for you. Before your transformation, you probably lived the reverse. Obstacles kept showing up. The same painful story repeated with different people and different settings. Nothing flowed easily because inside you were divided. Part of you lived for who you thought you had to be. Another part was quietly holding who you really are. Those parts were pulling in opposite directions. That inner split created static in your whole system. The outside world simply reflected that chaos. Now that you've come closer to being one inside yourself, your signal is cleaner. What is meant for you has a path to find you because you are no longer sending out mixed messages. This is why some people in situations that once felt like the center of your life simply dropped away in the middle of your change. It did not mean you failed. It did not mean you were abandoned by life, even if it hurt like loss. It was alignment doing its work. Your old frequency pulled in and held relationships that matched that old level. When you changed, those ties could not stay the same. Some grew with you. Others faded, not always in a fight, but in a soft, slow ending where both of you simply drifted. You did not push them out. Your growth only revealed that they were never truly meant to stay forever. There's one more truth I want you to hear. It is the one that separates people who just listen to this as content from those who feel it as a remembering. You did not pass this test because you are better, smarter, or more worthy than anyone else. You passed for one simple, hard reason. When everything in you screamed to turn back, to go back to the old pain you already knew, to return to the smaller life that at least made sense, you made a different choice. You chose to keep walking, even when that meant walking alone. You chose to sit inside the fire of your own transformation, even when stepping out into the cool air of denial would have been so much easier. You made that choice not once, but again and again, in small hidden moments nobody saw. Those choices are what forged you. The crown you carry is not visible. No one will show up one day with a certificate saying, "You did it. You transformed." There is no public ritual to mark the death of who you were and the birth of who you've become, but everyone you meet will feel it, even if they can't say why. Some will be drawn to the light you have integrated. Others will step back from the truth you now live. Both responses are right for them. You are not here to convince anyone anymore. You are here to exist as the fullest, truest expression of your integrated self. That alone is the teaching. This is not the end of your journey. Integration is not a finish line, it's a depth. A continuing unfolding into clearer and clearer expressions of who you are. But you have passed the turning point. The crucial test that shows whether change is real or just a nice story you tell yourself. You did the work in the dark. No applause, no guarantees, no promise of reward. You let go of the easy lie in order to stand in the hard truth. You chose your own company over the company of those who could not or would not meet you where you are. Becoming whole is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong movement. Each time you welcome another shadow into the light, each time you recognize a new inner pattern and bring it home instead of pushing it away, you go through another small death and another small rebirth. The difference now is that you know the land. You know the feeling of falling apart and coming back together. So even when it's hard, it no longer terrifies you in the same way. You've learned that you can survive your own endings. You've seen that what looks like a collapse is often the start of a new level of truth. The crown you wear now, the sovereignty you've claimed, is not something anyone can take from you. It does not depend on your job, your relationship status, your bank account, or how many people approve of you today. You did not win it by being perfect. You forged it by being willing to see yourself fully, by facing what you'd been running from, by taking back the pieces you had rejected, by choosing to be whole instead of just good. That is the difference between people who only try to improve themselves and people who come to truly know themselves. Self-improvement polishes the outside. Self-realization changes the ground you stand on. You have done the second. What comes next for you is not just more of the same, but it's also not a sudden escape into some fantasy life where everything is easy. It is a deepening of what you've already touched, a growing comfort with the truth of who you are. You will keep losing people who cannot or will not match your frequency. You will keep drawing in experiences that ask you to grow even more into your real self. The loneliness may never fully disappear, but your relationship with it will keep changing. You will see it less as punishment and more as the natural result of refusing to trade your truth for belonging. If you recognize yourself in these words, if you feel this knowing settle into your bones, understand this. You are part of a rare line of people. Not everyone who starts this journey sees it through. Not everyone who looks at their shadow has the courage to stay long enough to integrate it. Not everyone who touches their real self can bear the cost of standing there. But you did. You are. And that makes you, in the truest sense, sovereign. If this matches the truth you've been living, I invite you to subscribe and keep walking with me through these inner landscapes where real transformation happens. Leave a comment about the moment you knew you had crossed a line you could never uncross. Not for praise, not for attention, but for the other queens who need to know they are not alone in their sovereignty. The journey goes deeper from here. And I'll be here, mapping the territories most people are afraid to enter.